Welcome to the Way to Go podcast. I'm Bill McMinn from Eagleville Bible Church. Mark Hostetler with me, and our fine worship pastor. And one of the things I thought that we would talk about today is just, patience and that waiting on the Lord. So I was thinking about it. I was at the gym, I was lifting weights. Then I was thinking, what do I want to do podcasts on? I knew I want to do one for next week on Thanksgiving, ahead of Thanksgiving.
Right.
I knew that. And then I was just thinking about all the people that are in these situations where they're sick and they wonder when they're going to get better and when is it going to be over. And then you take any situation, whether it's you're on a job hunt or you're waiting for God to answer prayer and certain things, and just that waiting.
Yeah.
One of the things we hate to do, we just don't like to wait.
No way, man. It's against our nature. I mean, we want to make things happen. We want to make things go. I don't want to wait for somebody to respond to me. I want now, instant gratification kind of stuff. And a lot of times with God, he's trying to build that faith muscle in us, and part of faith is just moving forward in confidence, even though you don't see something, even though you don't have all the information, just knowing God is with you through it all.
Right. Well, you think about patience, and, I've thought about times where when I want to move, I want to move. When I want to see something get done, when I want to have an answer, and, it could have been with my family taking a trip. If I want to leave at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, I want to leave right then. I don't want to be waiting around. My one daughter especially used to drive me crazy. It seemed like every time I wanted to go somewhere, she was never on time and never ready. I started leaving her, actually. and I have no patience. When I want to get something done, I want to get it done. And once I get something in my head that is going to happen, it's going to happen. Now, you take that kind of thinking and put that into a world that doesn't control everything. We can't do what God can do. Sometimes we can't, our business may be dependent upon somebody else's decision or somebody signing off on a piece of paper or a bank giving us a loan or whatever it is. And now all of a sudden, okay, well, I want it done right now. I want to have an answer right now. I want to know what's going to happen right now. It doesn't always work that way.
No, and actually what happens, in my experience anyways, what happens is I resort to trying to control the situation.
Right.
I resort to trying to control the other people.
Right.
And that's unhealthy, and actually I try to become God in that situation.
Right. And that's what you can't do.
No, we can't do that. We can't allow our impatience to make us become like a God in that situation. You're not God. You never will be. Right.
I think people try to play God in sometimes their spouse's life because they want their spouse to change right now. And I remember I read Larry Crabb, he's a great marriage counselor, and he said, you can desire your spouse change, but you can't set it as your goal. Because you set it as your goal, you don't control what they're doing. You can only see you. Right. You're always going to be frustrated. You can desire it, you can pray about it, but it can't be your goal. But when it comes to that patience, and I mean, whether, again, it's a marriage problem, whether it's a financial problem, it's, you may have COVID and be laid up right now. And, when I was in my 2 weeks of it, I was just, when is this going to be over? Like, how long is this going to go? And even though now looking back on it, okay, it was a couple of weeks, you got through it. I feel fine today. But in the moment that you're in it, it really takes a lot of patience. And it says in Psalm 40, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the slimy pit, out of the mud and mire, set my feet on a rock, gave me a firm place to stand, put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear the Lord and put their trust in him. Blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord. And that's where the patience in God is just trusting him. Like we're talking about waiting on the Lord takes patience. Patience requires trust. You got to trust God to know what he's doing. You got to trust God that his timing is perfect. That sometimes if we force an issue or if we jump too soon, we might kind of get into something that's not really the best. Because we were just impatient and we had to have it now instead of waiting. Because sometimes when you're willing to wait for God to work something out, something better comes up.
Yeah, and actually earlier this year, Bill, you had the intentions of wanting to live in the present.
Right.
And I think a lot of times impatience robs us of the blessing of the present.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because we're constantly looking for that future thing ahead of us. And we're missing, there's actually a blessing that comes in quarantine.
Right.
If we allow that blessing to take place.
Right.
We have to just rest in the present, and allow God to do his thing right there, right now, where you're at, trusting him to get you through it. Right. It's going to happen. You're going to get to the other, that's our experience anyways.
Yeah,
we're going to get to the other side. We're going to be okay. And when I look back over the last 14 days of my quarantine and I go, so how did I use that time to best glorify God, to draw near to those that I love? You didn't stop living. You can text people, you can check on people, you can call people, how are you using the present to glorify God?
Right.
You know, and don't become impatient with that.
No,
you know?
yeah, I would agree. And I think, too, to realize he's going to lift me out of the slimy pit and out of the mud and the mire, and he's going to put my feet on a rock, that eventually that's going to happen. You know, there's going to be a day when you're standing strong. It's just right now, I know when we're in a tough situation, like we want an answer right now.
Yeah.
And that can lead to a lot of anxiety, a lot of needless stress and strain, probably some health issues, maybe even depression or discouragement, because I want to know right now. I want to know right now. Well, you don't get to make that decision on everything. Right. It's not always your call. You got to say, Lord, when your time is right, you're going to lift me out of this pit. You know, I think about Job, and, you know, we talk about his patience, you know, what he went through, and he lost his family. Eventually, God would give him everything back, but that all took time.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I love how the Psalm 5, verse 3, it says, "In the morning, Lord, you hear my voice," because I'm talking to you, I'm praying to you. "In the morning, I lay my requests before you, and then wait expectantly."
Right.
That's the key, I think. When you're talking about waiting on the Lord, you wait with expectation, knowing that he heard you.
Right.
It's not one of the things where you're like questioning, well, I don't know if he even heard me. Should I go back to him? Well, it's not bad to persevere in prayer, and that's not what I'm saying, but you expect to hear back from the Lord.
Right.
I think many of us might not expect that. We might lay up our requests, but we might just go forward with our plan and say, you know what, hey, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to do.
Well, I've had to beg the Lord for some pretty important things to me, because they had to do with my own family, and where you had to really be pleading, you know, about your children in certain ways. And I remember one time in that situation, I mean, obviously God didn't, it's not like you pray and the heart of your child has changed, you know, in a certain matter. So I remember at one time I was praying, you know, we've been through a lot, and I was praying, and then the one child that was having some struggles went to a Christian concert, met some of their college friends who were believers. I'm like, okay, well, this isn't a bad thing. We're at this big Christian music festival. They had some good speakers, and I would just kind of look over and watch, like when the speakers were speaking, and I'd see her listening, and I'd see her be into the music, and I'm like, okay. Okay. And, you know, I didn't, of course, push anything or say anything. I'm just praying about it. And probably the next month, the situation that had been heavy on my heart since, man, at that point, it had to be a good 3 months, it resolved itself. You know, well, really, I mean, I'm sure God resolved it, but that was part of it. I mean, part of it was just going there, and I'm watching. You know, you're talking about waiting expectantly in prayer. I'm watching. I'm watching to see what God's doing. And then next thing you know, I mean, the whole thing just did a 180, and I never, ever said one word about it. To him. I prayed to God about it. I mean, I said my piece early on. Obviously I gave clear direction early on, but I can't hammer it every day. So then I would say, okay, well, here's what needs to happen, and here's why this is a bad idea. And then I have to pray about it, and I just have to wait.
Yeah, and I think I love what you're saying there, because I think that's what expectation does, is it opens up our eyes to the realities around us, you know, and when you're not expecting an answer, then you're just blindly going forward on your own initiative. Right. Whereas, you know, when you're expecting God to move, you're looking for God to move. You're seeing things that you normally wouldn't see because you're expecting God to show up there. You know, there's power in patience. There's power in expectation, you know, because it opens up our eyes.
But I think patience means, you know, if I was going to define patience, I would say you got to be willing to wait, because you're not going to get it right away. And that's the thing, you know, that's where patience really comes in, to say, okay, God, it's kind of like you're planting a crop, you're doing the right thing, you're waiting for some other people to come around. I remember when I was in seminary, my church history professor said that one thing that he learned in church history is it would take somebody 45 years to come to a certain conclusion, and they wanted everyone else to reach the same conclusion in 45 minutes. Because once they were at that conclusion, of course, they wanted everyone to right away think like they thought, and they weren't willing to allow people to go through the process. And being a pastor over many years, you know, I've seen that you've had to have a lot of patience with people, because you've got to give them the same chance to come to conclusions, to reach conclusions, to see the things that you've seen and God's pointing you out. Well, they don't always see it right away. And you can tell them, but I found this, me speaking accurate language and being dead on in my communication, doesn't mean it's always received, doesn't mean it's always understood, because sometimes there's deception in there. Sometimes there's other factors in there. Sometimes there's emotions in there, and the person, just for whatever reason, couldn't really hear you at that time. And that takes patience too. You know, as you pray to God about these things, and just say, well, God, hey, I'm turning this over to you, and I got to wait for this person to come around and hopefully see it, and you communicate, you do your best. Patience. We got to be patient with people. We got to be patient with our spouses. We need to be patient with our children. You need to be patient sometimes with your coworkers, perhaps sometimes with your pastors,
and sometimes with trials. Right. And sometimes when you're in the middle of a trial and your body has to heal up, you have to go through that process of healing and going through a trial of whatever it is. You know, you have to endure it and persevere with patience. You know, I'm reminded of James. I love this, you know, when it says that consider it pure joy, brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work. Right. You know what I'm saying? Let it finish its work, because it says that you may be mature and complete, lacking nothing if you do that.
Right. Well, if James 5 too is like, hey, wait for, like the farmer has to wait for the rains. Yeah. We're waiting for the Lord to return. And sometimes I think we're waiting for the Lord to show up. And it just takes that patience of realizing, hey, in God's season, in the right time, he's going to come. Now, endurance is part of waiting on the Lord too. We've talked about patience, endurance. Listen, what I found in life is like this. It's like mutual funds. You hope when your money is in a 401k, Roth IRA, you hope that most of your mutual funds are going up. Some may be going down. Like, not every stock you have, no matter how many stocks you own, it would be rare that they're all going up. You know, most of them, you're hoping to win on most of them. It's like me as a picker. Not everything that I've bought as a buyer actually resold the way that I thought it might. You have to hope that you're right on most of it. But you got to also realize you're wrong on some of it. Right. So when it comes to endurance, sometimes we go through certain things that are hard. It doesn't mean everything in your life is hard. It doesn't mean everything in your life is bad. You may be having, you know, my kids are doing great, my job's going great, but maybe there's something else that's not going so great. It could be you're worried about your parents or a brother or sister or something like that. And that's really plaguing you, you know what I'm saying? Or maybe there's a friendship that's breaking up and it's just plaguing you. There are times where you've got to endure that and go through it, because it's just not easy. Not all of life is easy. Some of life it's just super hard. And I've been through those times where that was a very hard thing to get through. Now, you will get through it. It's hard to get through it, but you have to endure. Like, I can't quit on everyone. Like, I can't, and let's say even if someone had a loss of a child, which would be like a worse, you know, sum of all fears. If you got 2 or 3 other children, you can't give up on them. No. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I had a loss here, but I can't give up on this. I had this didn't go the way I wanted it to, but I can't be a bad spouse because this didn't go the way I wanted it to. No, that's one thing. It's got to it's got its place in my life, and hopefully I'm learning through it and growing through it. But you got to endure. And endurance to me is Galatians 6:9. Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we'll reap a harvest if we don't give up. And the important thing is you just can't give up. No. You got to keep going.
Not. Right. I mean, Hebrews 12, it reminds us that Jesus, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. You know, he's our example. He endured that persecution that led him to death, you know, and he did it, you know, to glorify God and to fulfill his mission, you know. It's so important for us. We have a mission. We have a purpose, you know, endure it.
Well, you're saying about Jesus Christ is when it's for the joy set before him, he had to go through a tough time to get to the joy. And sometimes what we're saying in life too is sometimes to get to that joy spot, you got to go through the tough time.
Well, you're a hiker. I mean, you get this, right? I mean, in order to see those great summits and the great views and all of that, man, you're going to go through some stuff, you know, and you're going to have to endure through miles of tracking and trailing and all that, you know.
And when we were in Kings Canyon, a lot of flies flying in our face until we got to a higher elevation where they weren't there anymore. Yeah. But I didn't think, my wife was so bothered by them, I didn't think we were going to make it 1/10 of a mile. And it was a 6-mile one-way hike, and it was 6 miles back.
My goodness.
And a lot of elevation, you know, at certain points, like stairs at the side of a mountain until we got to where we wanted to get. But yeah, I mean, it was for the joy set before you. It was for the, hey, I want to get to this point. This point's really beautiful, but I got to endure to get to that point. So absolutely. I mean, that would be an illustration of it. I think too, the serenity prayer is helpful. You know, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as he did the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that he will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. And so I look at that and say, yeah, I mean, you got to accept hardships as a pathway to peace at times. Yeah. Jesus Christ, or not Jesus, David said in the Psalm 23, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. It's through the valley, not to the valley. And that's an important prepositional difference. God's not taking you to the valley. He's taking you through the valley. And sometimes that's where hope comes in, which is also a part of what we're talking about. So you got to endure. You got to have patience when you're waiting for the Lord, and you got to hope. And part of the hope is, I'm going through the valley. Now, what would happen with why they would have to go through the valley and why any shepherd would take a sheep through the dark valley was because sometimes they were up on a pasture and it dried up and the sheep had nothing to eat. The only way to get to the next green pasture was through that deep, dark valley. And he was taking them to another. That's why it was through the valley. He's trying to get them to another pasture. And that's where God is trying to lead us sometimes to a better place. But he's got to take us through a hard and dark place to get us to the better place.
Yeah, and through that hard and dark place, you got to recognize his voice. Right. You got to, in the good times and the bad times, you got to be exercising that discipline of recognizing the voice of your Savior, of your shepherd that's leading you through that time, you know? So you got to be able to recognize the voice, follow the voice. It also says I think it's in Isaiah, I can't remember exactly, but he says, I led you with my right hand. You know, he hold out your hand, grab onto Jesus through this whole thing, you know, and he'll walk you through these trials.
That's not an ethereal thing. I mean, we're not talking about being ethereal. Hey, listen to his voice. Well, I haven't heard him today. God, you're not speaking to me, you know, because I haven't heard an audible voice. We're not talking about that. God's going to lead you right through the Bible. Typically, a person knows right from wrong. And what you're saying when you talk about listening to the voice of God, a lot of times, all this is a matter of doing is, listen, I don't care how much emotions you have. When you know something is the right thing to do, you do it. Well, it doesn't matter like how many things, well, I don't want to. Well, I don't think it'll work. It doesn't matter. When you know what is the right thing to do, the right thing, like what? Okay, be faithful to your spouse.
Exactly.
Tell the truth. Don't steal things. Work hard. You know there's a certain basic of life where God has already laid it out.
Exactly.
He's never going to take you contrary to that word. I mean, it's not like, hey, go down the street, knock on the third house because there's a woman I want you to talk to. Yeah, maybe you might be led that way. I mean, that's typically not the way that I'm led. Like there's this ethereal thing that no one's going to get and no one can ever figure out. Like the Bible says, I didn't put this on the top of a mountain where you can't find it. I didn't put it dark. I put it right here in front of you. I mean, the wall guy, like Moses said, it's right here.
That's a great
it's
point.
Simple. It's right here. It's the Bible.
But you're talking about a dark path, you know, and in those times you're tempted to get off course. You get there's a lot of temptations to get you off course. In the Psalms it says, "Thy word's a lamp unto my feet, a light unto my path."
Exactly.
So His word's going to guide us through that. That's the word of Christ, you know.
And that's where we got to come in and say, you know, I have no problem. Like, a lot of times I'll say, well, ask God, what do you want me to do? What's your wisdom on this? But I think it's the hope too. Like Psalm 23 or 27:13, I remain confident in this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong. Take heart. Wait for the Lord. This is what I want from you. He goes, listen, wait. I want you to be strong. I want you to take heart. And sometimes that's been my counsel when people have problems. Well, I don't know what to do. Well, I'll tell you one thing to do. Be strong.
Be strong.
You got to be strong. You got to put it out there what you're looking for. I've talked to women about that before. Well, you know, I don't know. My husband's not doing this, that, the other. I'm like, you got to be strong. You got to tell them exactly what you think. And a lot of times they'll come right around. You tell them, hey, let's say you might want to say, I want to read a chapter of the Bible every day together. Okay. What are they going to say? No.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Hey, I'd like you to take me out to dinner once a week. Are they going to say no? Typically not.
No.
I mean, once you put it out there and say, but you wait for the Lord, but you got to be strong too.
Yes,
you know what I'm saying? So that's what I look at it in life. Be strong in the Lord.
I think also, Bill, I think it's helpful to explain this hope idea, this idea of hope. It's not just wish. You know, it's not just, no, it's a confidence in what you're expecting. You know, you have confidence. He starts that with saying, I remain confident of this.
Right.
You know, hope is that confident expectation that God's going to come through.
Right.
You know, it's his promises. His promises are sure.
Right.
They're never going to fail us.
And again, it's an attitude of full confidence. God is going to meet you in your pain and problems, and you're going to be okay.
Amen.
So for those with COVID, those having marriage problems, those with financial issues, whatever it is, I know sometimes we get impatient. I've been there plenty of times, and I just had to wait, and I just had to go through it. One of the greatest advice, by the way, when I was sick that I got was, you have to go through it.
Wow.
You have to be patient. You've got to just hang in there, and you got to keep going, because you're going to get through it. There is no way to speed up the process. There's nowhere to change the process. The process is the process. What the virus is going to do, the virus is going to do. You just got to hang in there, and you will get through it. And sometimes God's going through a process in our lives. It's going to take what time God decides it's going to take, and you got to be patient. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. You will have a great, awesome, and a blessed week. Keep waiting on the Lord.